Let's try this. Of course, this is not working. Why is this not working? Okay, hello everyone, welcome. Just trying to get things rolling here on Instagram, and I'm having a few technical difficulties. Why? Of course. How's everyone doing tonight? Welcome, come on in, tap the screen, share the live. Tonight we're going to be talking about boundaries. This is not working. All right, looks like I'm going to have to go live on Facebook instead, as well as on here. Welcome, guys. Really excited. How's everybody doing tonight? Where are you all from? Type in the chat where you're at. Hey, Mark, good to see you. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. I should have tested earlier for the Instagram. All right, hang on just a sec here. All right, boundaries. All right. All right, welcome. Okay, so for those of you that are new to my channel, hang on just a sec. Paste. Get this going here. Okay. Hi, Jeffrey. Good to see Jeffrey Dahmer. Well, that's an interesting name. I'm sure you get a lot of jokes about that. Oh, it's the original. You've changed, have you? Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that you've changed. Are you vegan now? So, hello everybody. Okay, we are live on Facebook. We're good to go here. Oh, that's great. That's great. You like broccoli a lot. That's good. So, welcome everybody. If this is your first time joining me, my name is Tina. I am a happiness coach. I share my experience, strength, and hope on here in order to help heal people from past trauma, to help them go from being in a place where they do not feel good, that they are depressed, anxious, in a dark place, and helping them move into a happier place. I do this by sharing my experience, strength, and hope, and I tell stories about things that I've been through, how I've moved through that, in hopes that it just helps one person out there. So you're going to follow. Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome. All right. It's a joke. Besides the joke, I actually need this. Okay, well, that's good, Jeffrey. I'm glad that you are here, and hopefully we can help you out. If you do have any specific questions, feel free to type those in the chat and then I can try to answer those. Kanye, okay. All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about boundaries and setting them, why you need to set them, and other people's reactions to them and how they can often prevent us from setting the boundaries that we need to set. So, in the beginning of my healing journey, the biggest part of setting boundaries was knowing that I actually needed to set them. I was very unaware of that there were things, or that I could even say no, or say, you know what, I don't actually like that, because I was so outwardly focused because of trauma that I looked to make sure everybody else was okay, assuming that that would make me okay. That if they were happy, I would be happy. that wasn't always the case. So I would be in this position of always giving, 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 and never receiving. Still on the lower end of that scale, better than I used to be, and it is an ongoing improvement. I'm getting echo feedback. Okay, cool. Sorry, tech help. So becoming aware that you need to set a boundary is the first step. So one of the ways that I did this in the beginning is I would catch myself when I would say yes to things that I really ended up not really wanting to do. And I did this for two reasons: is understanding why I was saying yes when I really meant no, or I was doing things that I didn't really want to do, which when you do that, what it ends up doing is sets you up for resentment and anger towards the other person, because you feel obligated to do the thing they've requested rather than saying, you know what, I don't really want to do that thing. So the whole first part for me was being able to understand, do I actually want to do this thing, or don't I want to do this thing? And one of the main ways that I would catch myself in and making sure that I corrected that behavior is if I defaulted to my automatic yes, and I said, yes, yeah, sure, no problem, I can do that, blah, blah, blah. I would have to, when I realized I was starting to get resentful about it, I made myself go back and say to the person, hey, you know what? I know I said I was going to do X, Y, Z. I don't really want to do that anymore because of these reasons, and I need to change my mind. So doing those kind of things was really key at me being much more aware, because if I didn't force myself to have to go back on my promise kind of thing, and hold myself accountable to say, you know what, I don't really like doing that. I don't really want to do that. It was really important for me to actually go back and make those changes, because the next time I was tempted to go into the automatic yes, I would pause long enough to kind of go, do I actually want to do this? Can I actually do this? Because a lot of times, especially in a work environment, I would often say yes to projects or assignments and stuff like that, that I didn't really feel like I had the bandwidth or the capacity, until somebody I watched somebody else kind of say, hey, I've got these 10 things on the go. If you want me to do that one thing, then one of these 10 things has to come off my plate. So which is more priority? And when I saw somebody demonstrate that, I was like, oh shit, you can say that? And what ended up happening is I saw the manager kind of go, oh, you know what? I just automatically thought, like they just came to them out of habit. And they're like, no, those things that you're working on are actually much more important. I'll go give this to somebody else. And it was like, oh, it doesn't have to be a whole big thing. It doesn't have to be a big blow up. It doesn't have to be a fight or a guilt trip because you said no, that you couldn't do it. And it wasn't so much that they just said a flat out no. They gave an alternate solution saying, hey, I only have this much bandwidth. This is what I'm capable of doing. So again, that requires another level of awareness of yourself, of what is it that you are capable of taking on. And sometimes I know I'm not very good at gauging this, and I think I can take on the world, right? So I will often say yes and then go, oh shit, I can't do all these things. Hey Jeff, good to see you from Manila. Welcome, see you on Facebook. That's great. So being aware of what your capacity is, where you're at, what you're able to take on, what you're not able to take on, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, is the key ingredient with being able to set a boundary. Because if you are unaware of those things, then you're going to default to whatever somebody else wants you to do. And then you may be setting yourself up for conflict or resentment. Another good check-in is if you are assuming that if I do these things for this person, then they are going to do something back for me, or I can extract a favor from them later down the line. And if you set yourself up for that without actually communicating that, then you're setting yourself up for future unhappiness in that relationship because it wasn't clearly stated, wasn't clearly identified. And that can happen on both sides, right? So because in social situations and work situations, there are a lot of unwritten rules and expectations where people just assume that you operate the way that they operate, that their values are your values. And then we run into conflict when those values don't actually align, or the methods to achieve those values don't actually align. So being aware of why you want to set the boundary, and what your capacities are, and what the boundary is. And is it a hard boundary or is it a softer boundary? So in the example of the work situation where the boss came and said, hey, I want you to do this one thing, and they had 10 other things that they were working on, and getting them to prioritize which one it is a flexible boundary in that, yes, I can do that. However, this is the thing that needs to be sacrificed. So offering possible options is a good way to set boundaries, going, you know what, sure, I can vacuum the floor, but that won't leave me time to start getting dinner ready. So which is more important to you? So giving somebody the option and knowing what you have time for and what you can put on your plate is important, okay? And then offering possible options, possible solutions, rather than, because I know when I first started setting boundaries, because I wasn't used to saying no, oftentimes there'd be like things people, example, I was out partying with some people, and it was, again, I had to see somebody else do this example. So I was out partying with some of the guys from Midnight Shift, and I gotten tricked in a few times before, but I had learned my lesson the hard way of where I drank too much, blacked out, ended up puking in the guy that I liked him, and I puked in his car so that he would know exactly how much I liked him. And yeah, so that was a whole little thing, but I had learned from that lesson. My brother was not very impressed with me because they just dropped me off. And when I got to work on the Sunday night, because I worked midnights back then, and the first thing everybody on the shift started asking me, and this is how I knew I blacked out, because I didn't remember some of the things, and that was the only time I had ever experienced this. So I walk into work and they're all like, so Tina, do you know where you live? And I'm like, yeah, of course I do. Why? They're like, well, when so-and-so was trying to drop you off, you didn't know where you lived and you just kept saying sorry for throwing up in the car. So when they did finally get my address out of me, I guess they just kind of dumped me off and left me there, and my brother found me in the front lobby. Oh man, that was a long time ago. So, and I digress with that little story, but what ended up happening is afterwards, when I was partying with the guys, I knew not to drink that much, because what had happened that first time is they tried to get me going by saying, oh, I bet you can't drink this much. And then I was out to prove that I could, and that was a mistake, like a dummy. So I took the bait and went for it and paid the price for it. So I was a dumbass. But I wasn't even legal drinking age back then. I think I was 18. Maybe, yeah, I think I was 18. So I shouldn't have been drinking at all, let alone being dared. Hey, welcome. Thank you for the gifts. So had that happen. And then the next time I was out partying with the guys, it was funny because I watched them that they were doing it with this new guy. They were goading him on, and I was watching him try to keep the pace with them, and I'm like, these guys were friggin' pros. You don't try to keep up with them. And I sat back because I was like, no, I'm not doing that again. No, thank you. But they would also do things. They'd pass joints around, and before I would partake, just because, you know, I didn't want to seem like, you know, the weird one that, you know, is the joy kill kind of thing. So, but as they were passing the joint around, there was one guy that he was like, yeah, no thanks. And I was like, what? Wait, you can say no to this? Oh my God, this is like mind-blowing for me. I'm like, I didn't know that that was a possibility. So seeing somebody else demonstrate setting a boundary, that it's a healthy boundary, it's not a big deal, and that you can say no to certain situations that you are uncomfortable with. Because up until that point, I thought I had to say yes. I didn't know that there was another option, which is, to anybody else on the outside, they're probably thinking like, well, of course there is. Like, are you dumb? And I'm like, no, I'm not dumb. I was traumatized. I didn't know that other options existed. So now that I know that that option exists, and I'm aware, I can make a different decision. I can choose to do something different. But oftentimes when we've grown up in environments where there was trauma, there was abuse, all this kind of stuff, we just think that this is the normal way to operate. And it's only when we see that there are different possibilities available to us that we truly are empowered to be able to make a different choice and know whether or not we want to do something like that. If it's not comfortable for us, that we are able to say no. So starting to look at myself and understand what made me comfortable, what didn't make me comfortable, and what I was willing to participate in and what I wasn't, is a big part of my healing journey. And I started to set boundaries in small ways. So once I saw that guy say no thanks, I was like, oh, no thanks. And it was like no big deal, but I had to model that behavior. I had to see it done in real time. And I was like, oh, okay, now I can do this thing, right? So that was one other way. And then I started setting boundaries in other small areas. And it's funny because some of these areas, they ended up being things that had such huge impact, because when you start setting boundaries, even if they're healthy ones, even if it benefits the other person, sometimes you will get this weird fucking reaction from people where they don't want you to change it, and they will deliberately go out of their way to sabotage what it is that you're trying to set the boundary on. So I'll give an example story. So one of the boundaries that I had set, and again, I was probably about 18, still living at home. And up until then, I guess my mom was still doing my laundry and stuff like that. So I decided I was going to be like a grown-up adult, since I was working full-time, so I should be able to do this. I started doing my own laundry. And so I was like, don't touch my laundry. Just leave it in my room. I will take care of it. And I would do my own laundry. I'm not expecting you to do mine. You can just do yours, and that should take some work off of your plate, right? And this weird thing happened is my mom kept sneaking into my room to get my laundry, and I had to keep reinforcing the boundary, and we ended up fighting a few times over it. But I was like, this is crazy. And she would come up with all kinds of crazy excuses of like, oh, well, the load wasn't full enough, so I grabbed some of your clothes to top it up. But she just kind of kept sneaking into my room and stealing my stuff until I had to set a hard boundary. I said, I don't care if you have one thing in that laundry, do not touch my laundry, leave it alone. It's like, I want this responsibility. I want to take this on. I want to know that I've taken care of it. And so it's something that's really weird. And it's like, you know, one of those little things. And we were all in recovery at the time. Hey, Brash, good to see you. Welcome. Where are you from? Type in the chat where you guys are from. So, So that was like a funny little story because it's like, fortunately, we were all in recovery and therapy and stuff like that. So being able to talk about it, but she would also try to get my brother to sneak in my room and grab the laundry. It was one of those simple things, but it was like that was a good example of how I'm not sure if I like turtles. I don't think I've interacted with turtles too much, but I seem to like them. So, but yeah, so just setting small boundaries like that were really, really weird. So if you can get that, because people are used to you behaving in a certain way. So when you make a change, even if it's a small one, it can bring up very threatening feelings for them. And they may try to get you to change back to your old ways, even if they've been begging for you to make that change. Even if they wanted you to make that change, it's going to bring up stuff within them. And if they aren't prepared to deal with it, they don't have the emotional awareness, what's going to happen is they're going to try and get you to change back to your old ways because they feel uncomfortable with it and they don't know what to do. So example, my grandfather, when he would try to prove that he wasn't an alcoholic by making sure he didn't start drinking before 11 a.m., and he would pace back and forth, or he'd go for a little while, like, if him and my grandmother ended up having a fight over stuff, then what he would do, yeah, you tried to quit smoking? Yeah, exactly. That happened too. When I used to be a 2-pack a day smoker, like regular cigarettes, not the herbal remedies stuff. But I smoked 2 packs a day. And then when I quit, everybody kept trying to offer me cigarettes. And it's like, oh, just come on, here, have a puff. We're out for a drink. It's no big deal. And I wouldn't do it. And, but then there was one day that I got really pissed off. And I was like, and I had that fuck it moment. And I went and I had a cigarette. And I felt terrible. I felt so guilty. I felt all of this progress I had made because I had gone months and I hadn't been smoking. And then I had one cigarette. And that gripped, the addiction came back so quickly. And I just had to white knuckle it to try and make sure I didn't smoke again. And I remember I even had a dream that I had had a cigarette, and in the dream I was like, oh, it felt so good to have that cigarette. And I was like so relieved. And then when I woke up, I was like, oh, I'm beating myself up. I'm like, oh, I did it again. I ruined it. I didn't follow through. And then all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, I'm in bed. I just woke up. It was only a dream. Okay, I haven't started smoking again. But that was the last time I took a drag of a cigarette because I was like, no, that was not a good thing because I did not want to go back to that. But, so there's little things that people will try to get you to change back to your old ways. They will try to, and just know that it's not because they don't want you to succeed. They do. It's just they don't know what to do with their own emotions. So you just reassuring them that everything's still okay. Just because I'm not smoking anymore, just because I'm not drinking anymore, doesn't mean our relationship has to change. Now, they may be uncomfortable with it because you changing might be now showing them what is possible. Just like I used to take, a hit of the joint as it went by because I didn't know I could say no without it becoming a big deal. Once I saw somebody demonstrate that, I was all over that. I was like, okay, I can actually choose something different here and I don't have to continue to do that. So, which I love sharing these kind of stories actually because it always amuses me when people think I'm like sweet and innocent because I've been through a lot in my life and I'm like, oh bitch, if you only knew half of it. And I am sharing some of that stuff now, but I do, that being said, I've done a lot of healing work. I don't typically participate in self-destructive behaviors. Now that's all relative of, they've improved greatly from where I used to be to where I am now. There's always room for growth. And once you get that taste for growth, and the happiness that you actually feel on the other side of getting through the pain and working through that pain, it is very, very freeing, and that becomes the new addiction. Growth and improving yourself and being that best version of yourself, that becomes the new addiction. And this is part of why I love hanging around the entrepreneur community and online space, because everybody here, you guys aren't here just because you're here. You're seeking something and seeking answers and seeking a way to possibly change things in your life. And the fact that you've come across my channel, maybe there's just one little piece that I'm going to say for you tonight that might actually make a difference for you and might just give you that reassurance, that push, that, hey, it's okay, I can actually do this. Oh my God, I didn't know I could do that. So hopefully that's something that you can do. So that is how sometimes other people's reactions can change. That's my cat Katie in the background who's yelling her head off. They wait for me to do the live to do this. So please be patient with me as I try to be patient with my cat. So also is often there are spoken and unspoken boundaries. And those unspoken ones are usually the toughest to understand. And especially if you go into new environments, there may be, and there are more rules than boundaries. So people have certain ways of doing things, certain etiquettes, certain ways of handling things, and oftentimes those are unspoken. The people in that core group understand what those boundaries are, or those procedures, or the unspoken rules. So for example, years ago I got invited to a dinner party, and we had a great time. It was a huge, so many people there. They had servers. It was like in a house, and it was just a really beautiful event. And I thanked the hosts. I thanked them. You know, we brought them gifts, and everything was great and everything. Excuse me. So did all these things, and what I didn't know is about a week later, I get an angry message from the partner. And they were really upset and bent out of shape because I didn't call back the next day to thank them once again for having a good time and for being invited to the party. I'm like, but I must have thanked you and profusely, like, gushed all over you at the party before we left, and it took us 20 minutes to leave. And but there was an unspoken rule, an unspoken boundary that I didn't have any awareness of. And excuse me, just gonna have a drink of water here. So because I didn't know the rules, they took offense to me not calling them back up and thanking them the next day, because apparently that was etiquette that I was not aware of. So sometimes people can have boundaries, so be careful. If somebody has upset you because they didn't do something that you expected of them, make sure to question, first of all, did I clearly communicate to them that was an expectation? Or is that something that you find, well, it's just understood, it's just common sense? Well, common sense isn't so common, and depending on the area that you're in, there's different rules and different etiquettes. And you know, I don't know, where let's say you're in a country where there's scorpions. I've heard this example. I live in Canada. We don't have these kind of things up here. I'll just go put on my shoes. But someplace where there's scorpions, you might want to look in your shoes before you just stick your foot in there, kind of thing, because there could be a scorpion in there, and it's common sense in that area to check your shoes before you put them on. So it's kind of like, but up here in Canada, that would not be something that is commonplace to look in your shoe, make sure there's no scorpions in there. So that's an example of how you can have unspoken boundaries and how that can cause conflict and unhappiness in a relationship just because people are unaware. Okay. Now Stumpy's joining in. I don't know, maybe because they hear me talking, they think Mummy must be singing, so we're gonna sing too. Oh boy, gotta love it. The other challenging part of setting boundaries is you have to, on some level, be vulnerable. And that can be very difficult because you could say, this is the boundary I need to set, or you know what, this is what I need in order to take care of myself. And somebody may not actually like it. And not like it enough to the point where they kind of go, well, I guess we're done. And it's like, what? Because I've had that too before where, you know, boundaries got set and it was just, and I'm very careful when I'm setting boundaries that I'm not just putting up a wall, I'm doing stuff to actually protect me. So if somebody's setting a boundary with you, they're not doing it to you, they're doing it for themselves, right? If they're trying to do it as a way to control you, that's a different thing. But if they're doing it more out of protection for themselves, if you honor that, they're more likely to relax a bit and then hi, Stumpy. They're more likely to be more flexible on that boundary as long as it's not a hard no, hard pass kind of thing, right? So they may, because that's what I was talking about. So when I first started setting boundaries, oftentimes I'd say that no, instead of just a no thank you, I'd be like, no, like, and get upset about it. It's like, you know, because I needed that additional energy because I wasn't used to actually setting a boundary. So sometimes it came out at a 15 out of 10 instead of, you know, a 3 or 4. So I had to start learning how to say the no's and be okay with it and be gentle. And sometimes it'd be too high, and then sometimes it wouldn't be high enough that people weren't paying attention to me. So I'd set it at a 3, and then they wouldn't listen. They'd violate the boundary, like my mom sneaking into my room and taking the laundry. And so I had to reset the boundary, but now at a louder volume. And now this is 6 or 7, or like not so much loud. You don't have to get loud about it, but you have to restate it at least and be firm and saying, hey, I know we talked about this before. I really want this to happen, and here's why. And maybe you have to add a bit more explanation so that people understand where you're coming from. Often explaining why will be an important piece of it in order for them. Hey, Karma, welcome. So, and that takes you being vulnerable and understanding what it is that you want, because what are you going to do if you set the boundary and they don't want to honor it? So getting yourself to the point is like, how important is this boundary to me? Is it a hard no? And if they don't respect it, do you know what you're willing to do? And it's just like in negotiations. When you know your bottom line and when the deal is not going to go through, what's going to break the deal? Stumpy, stop it. You have to know your bottom line and know when the deal's not going to go through and when you have to get up and walk away from the table. So that can be really threatening for yourself, because it's like, well, I need to set this boundary, but I don't want to ruin the relationship. And then often what ends up happening is we avoid setting the boundary. People continue to cross our boundaries because we never told them that there was a boundary. And so they continue to do what they do because that's what, they're not doing it to you, they're just doing it. But we start taking personal offense to that as like, how could they not respect me? Like the the unspoken rule of calling back the next day after the dinner party to thank the host again, even though you did it a million times there. Had I known that, I would have done that. And I did that every time after, and then they didn't like that I did that because they had told me. And I was like, so now I was only doing it because they told me, and it's not, they're just, it was like even when you follow through with the boundary or the expectation, it still wasn't the same. So being vulnerable, knowing what it is that you want out of the situation, knowing what your bottom line is, what you're willing to accept, how hard is this boundary? Do you have flexibility in it? What happens if somebody chooses not to follow or respect that boundary? Where do you go with that? And that's what can be pretty challenging with setting boundaries. And a lot of times we get ourselves into a fear state. Excuse me. So, and how I dealt with that kind of stuff was, is when I got into a state of fear, I had the choice of feeling guilt or resentment. And if I felt guilt for setting a boundary, saying I'm not comfortable with that, yes, I had to learn to feel okay with feeling guilty for setting the boundary, because it wasn't a realistic guilt. I wasn't doing anything to harm somebody. I was doing something to protect myself and my peace and what it is that was important to me. So this was an act of self-care. And when you're not used to doing that, you will feel guilty the first few times you go to set a boundary, especially if you don't know how it's going to be received. And then especially if when you first do it, they don't honor those boundaries. So now you got to set them again. Okay. Because if I didn't, what I was setting myself up for was resentment and that angry feeling. And then eventually you end up blowing up or being sarcastic, being mean, because you let it slide too many times that you didn't actually speak up, you didn't voice the opinion, or if you did, they didn't honor it. And then you continue to just say, well, don't do that. And you didn't have a bottom line set in place of like, what am I going to do if they don't listen? If they don't follow through? Am I willing to, I don't want to escalate it straight to a walk away, but it's like, you know what? I may not see you as much, or you know what? I'm only going to talk to you at lunch or something like that, or whatever it is kind of thing that you need to provide yourself that space. Okay. Yeah. So those are the main things with being able to set boundaries and, prevent yourself from getting in a state of resentment, because if you are in resentment, then you are not going to be happy in the relationship. They're not going to be happy. They're going to feel that energy from you. And they may not understand what's like, then they're going to start to label you. Oh, you're grumpy. You're a bitch. You're this, you're that, whatever. But because you haven't spoke up, because you haven't communicated, then they don't understand, right? And and you can also gauge it by the length or the value of the relationship. Like, do you want this person in your life for a short time? Do you want them in for your life for a long time? So if it's a longer time, then there's usually, a lot more communication that needs to happen, a lot more understanding, patience, and understanding why they continue to cross that boundary when maybe to them, they're just doing their thing, and to you, it's a violation, right? So like the example of the dinner party thing, we're not calling back the next day. It's like, well, I didn't know that was an issue. So, and I wouldn't have thought that, right? Or, so another thing that would happen, to just give examples, is like, some people are very particular about making sure that they arrive on time. And I think that's a good thing. There's important stuff. I'm a little bit more flexible when it comes to like friendships, and it's like, hey, come on over or hang out or whatever. If we don't have a set time, you don't give me a set time or a set reason as to why. That why is so important for me. Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Because if I understand it's important to you because of X, Y, Z, then I will be able to say, you know what? Yes, I can meet that. Or you know what? No, I can't meet that because I have to do these other things and I wanted to come over, but I thought I had a little bit more flexibility in the time frame. So I was going to come over, a half hour, an hour later than you expected. So that is huge at being able to communicate those things. And I would talk with a friend of mine. She was very, very tight on times, and she would blow up if you weren't there on time. In fact, if you weren't there 10 minutes early, she would blow up. And I'd be like, if you show up at 10 minutes early to an event I've done, then I'm probably going to blow up. And so having those kind of things, I wouldn't blow up, actually. It takes a lot to get me to blow up. You've got to be pretty fucking spectacular to get me to actually lose my shit. So what I'm trying to say is people have different value systems, different ways of operating, things that'll rub them the wrong way. And without that communication, you can't navigate the relationship in a way that is healthy, in a way that is respectful of both sides, right? Because it's an act of respect to set that boundary. And if somebody says, you know what, I just need some space because I'm feeling anxious and I just need to calm down a bit, or I'm feeling pissed off. I had this with a boss. She like, if her trigger got set off, and she was like pissed off, I knew to just give her space. Because at first I'd try to come in and try and help, and that irritated her, and she had to set the boundary, just give me some space. So I did, but I would let her know, hey, I'm here if you need me. I'm just going to be over there doing this thing. And so I would be able to give her assurance to let her know I was available if she needed support, if she needed help, she just needed to vent about things, then I'm here for her. And if she just needed time to cool down and kind of catch herself, thank you, Alfred. Welcome back. Welcome back. If she just needed time to catch her breath and just calm down, then she had that space, and it was an act of respect to her to give her that space. So in healthy relationships, you are going to be able to communicate that boundary, and you're going to be able to explain to somebody why that's important to you and because you feel XYZ, right? Now that takes that vulnerability, and it takes you, because what happens if they're like, well, I don't give a shit how you feel about something, then you're like, oh, well, fuck. Now what do I do, right? And so you have to know ahead of time what is that bottom line. And frankly, if somebody said something like that to you, do you really want them in your life? I mean, do you have to have them in your life? Because what the fuck, man? Because if you actually care for somebody, even if you don't like maybe love them, you just respect them as a coworker or a fellow colleague or, a friend, and you're like, hey, that's important to you. Okay, no big deal. Unless it violates something for you, then you might have to say, I understand where you're coming from. This is my perspective. This is what's important to me. How can we find a middle ground here? And just come from the perspective that it is possible to negotiate a win-win situation, that it doesn't have to be I win, you lose, you win, I lose kind of thing. It doesn't have to be that way. You can negotiate win-wins, and you can meet in the middle and find some sort of middle ground. Now, if you've grown up in an environment where if you were vulnerable, that just got weaponized against you, you're going to be a little bit resistant to opening up. I definitely have been in certain situations, until I learned that I don't want to sit with that resentment. I don't want to sit with that anger. I'm a firm believer holding that kind of anger and resentment inside of you can can give you cancer. And I think that was kind of, my grandmother held so much resentment and anger inside of her. And then she'd blow up occasionally, then she'd feel guilty for a little bit, and then she'd build up that resentment and anger again because she wouldn't set the boundaries, she wouldn't follow through on the things that were important to her. And I watched that behavior modeled over and over again. So it was a wonder I had challenges setting boundaries. Because by the time she actually got to the point where she'd set a boundary, she had already let it go a few times. She was already angry, already hostile. And so when she communicated the boundary, it came off as a 15 out of 10 instead of, maybe a 3 if she had addressed it the first time it was a problem for her. So, and I think years and years and years of holding on to those angry feelings, not expressing them, not talking about them, not dealing with them when they're actually small things that you can actually manage, which that alone, because I've learned that, and that has been my experience, and it's been actually very beneficial to me. So when I bring up something small to somebody who is used to not setting boundaries until they're really pissed off, that gets sometimes perceived as, what the fuck? This is like, this happened once and you're setting a boundary? To them, it seems like I'm over the top because maybe in their house they didn't set any boundaries until they got ticked off about something. And then when they got ticked off about it, then they'd set the boundary and, it would be a hard fist kind of thing, rather than, oh, hey, this is bugging me. Let's not do that, right? And so if you have a healthy behavior and you try to apply that in a bit more of a unhealed, I don't want to say full toxic, but say an unhealed area, or even if it's a healthy environment, but this is an uncharted territory, this is new, because this can happen with change management stuff too, even in healthy environments. You go to make a change with something, if somebody's not used to that behavior, the first thing that they're going to want, if they feel threatened, is for you to change back. Just change back to the old ways. I don't want to deal with this. This is too difficult. You're making me look at stuff I don't want to look at. Just friggin' change back. And that will cause a lot of problems in your work and relationships and stuff like that. So being able to understand both sides of it, not just you setting the boundary, but the potential reactions of the people that you're talking to, how they're going to react to it, how to ease them into accepting that boundary as well, knowing that you're probably going to have to state that boundary more than once, to reinforce and make sure that they know it. And, not only that, you also have to know, do they have the ability to hold that boundary? So sometimes we can set a boundary that's an unrealistic expectation. And if we aren't aware that the other person may not actually speak up and say that they can't, example, myself, I was terrible at taking too much on my plate, especially in a work environment. I just kept saying yes because I didn't know I was allowed to say no. So being aware of that, giving somebody an option to say, hey, I need you to do this, but it's important to me that it gets done within this time frame, because if not, these are going to be the consequences, and then I'm going to be really upset. So if you cannot do that, I would prefer you to say no to me, or at least offer me a different timeline, and I can see if I can work with that. So it's a different way of communicating, rather than just a set expectation of you just handing that to the person, I need this done by this time, and not caring what else they have on their plate, expecting that they should just be able to manage it and prioritize that. Could be setting yourself up for failure, could be setting them up for failure, setting each other up for resentment, because there's unspoken communication. And it's just a matter of being able to talk through that. And even with the awareness that I have and understanding of this subject matter, it can be easy to default to old behaviors when you're under pressure, when you're under tight timelines, you have certain things you just need to get done. In those particular cases, you are going to want to circle back afterwards and then talk it through. And I had a good demonstration. I had a boss at one time, she was really good at this, that sometimes she would just come out, she'd like, I need this stuff done, da 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 da, done now, right? And then afterwards, when the dust had settled, she would come back around and she'd be like, okay, thank you so much. I really needed that done. This was what was going on. I just didn't have time to explain everything for you. So I really appreciate that you were able to jump through hoops and get that done, kind of thing. So being able to do that is another way to respect and honor the boundaries, and also to come back and correct any behaviors that you may have fallen short on your ideals, and just to make sure that the relationship is still intact. And there's a lot more forgiveness and understanding that way, but it can't happen if there's no communication. So guys, I think that will be what we're gonna wrap up for tonight. I hope you guys found that helpful. So tomorrow night we're back on here, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm gonna try again tomorrow to see if I can figure out how to get the Instagram thing to work. I'm gonna try streaming on Instagram. If you came in halfway through, you want to catch up, I am uploading the videos onto, thanks Mark. I'm so glad that you keep coming back. It really warms my heart to see familiar faces in here, so thank you. So I will be uploading it onto YouTube. My channel is Coach Tina B 125, so you can check me out there. And I've posted a bunch of previous videos, so you can go through and listen to those again. And I have my artwork as part of the thumbnails too. So my artwork I do sell on Redbubble. You can get prints. If you are interested in any of the originals, you can direct message me. And this allows me to continue my passion, which art therapy has been a big part of my recovery process, helps me stay grounded, stay positive, stay happy, so that I can come on here every night and do these talks in hopes to help somebody heal their trauma, heal, and give them awareness of what's possible for change and happiness. Okay guys, so with that, I'm going to wrap it up and we will talk to you again tomorrow. Take care. Bye.